She couldn't scream anymore. 18 hours of labor had stolen her voice. But she could see. She saw her husband walk in with another woman. She saw his mother hand him papers and whisper, "Do it now while she's weak." She saw him place the divorce documents on her bleeding stomach and say, "Sign it. You got what you wanted, a baby to trap me with. Now you're done." Her daughter was 6 minutes old. Her stitches were still fresh. And security was already dragging her out into a snowstorm because his mother said, "She doesn't belong in this family." What they didn't know, that mansion was never theirs. Her late father had left her $1.3 billion. And what she discovered about them, it was deadly. But before we go further, if you believe no mother should be discarded in her most vulnerable moment, subscribe right now. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Women's voices need to be heard worldwide, because the way she made them pay will shock you to your core. Now, let's go back to the beginning of her story. 10 years old. That's when Serafina Halvorsen learned the world doesn't stop for grief. The car crash took both her parents in a single night, and by morning she was alone. No relatives stepped forward. No family friends opened their doors. Just a social worker with tired eyes and a clipboard, telling her to pack whatever fits in one small bag. What do you take when your entire life has to fit in a backpack? She chose her mother's scarf and her father's watch. Everything else got left behind. The foster homes blurred together after that. Some were cold, some were cruel, most were just indifferent. She learned to make herself small, to speak only when spoken to eat fast before someone decided she'd had enough. Other kids sensed weakness like sharks smell blood. They called her charity case and orphan girl, and worse things she tried not to remember. But Serafina discovered something in those years that money could never buy. She learned to survive. She learned that tears changed nothing, that complaining made things worse, that the only person she could count on was herself. Every night she'd touch her mother's scarf and her father's watch and whisper the same promise. "I'll make it. I'll be okay. I'll be more than this." By 28, she'd kept that promise in her own quiet way. No mansion, no fancy car, but she had something better, purpose. She volunteered at St. Michael's Hospital 3 days a week, held the hands of patients who had no visitors, and read to children who couldn't afford books. She tutored kids in the rough part of town, the ones who reminded her of herself. Her apartment was small, barely big enough for a bed and a desk, but she kept it spotless. She'd iron her one good dress on Sunday nights, meal prep on Mondays to stretch her grocery budget, and never once asked for help. Pride? Maybe. But when you've spent your childhood being pitted, you learn to stand on your own 2 feet even when they're tired. March 17th changed everything. Serafina was leaving the hospital after her volunteer shift when she heard the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, the horrible silence that followed the impact. A black Range Rover had clipped a delivery truck and spun into a light post. People stopped. People stared. People pulled out their phones to record. Nobody moved. She didn't think so. She ran. The driver was slumped against the steering wheel, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, airbag deployed but clearly dazed. She yanked the door open. It took 3 tries, her hands shaking but determined, and assessed him with the basic first aid training she'd gotten from the hospital. "Sir, can you hear me? Don't move your neck. Stay still." Her voice was steady even though her heart hammered. She pressed her scarf against the wound on his head, applied pressure, and checked his pupils. "Someone call 911, she shouted at the crowd. Still nobody moved. Now, that got them. The man's eyes focused on her face, confused, trying to speak. "You're okay," she told him. "You're going to be okay. Just breathe." She stayed with him, talking constantly, keeping him conscious until the ambulance arrived. When the EMTs took over, she tried to slip away. She'd done what needed doing. That was enough. But the man caught her wrist. "Wait, what's your name?" His voice was rough but educated, the kind of voice used to give orders. "Serafina," she said. "Serafina Halvorsen." He studied her face like he was memorizing it. "I'm Leander Quinton. Thank you." She nodded, pulled her hand free gently, and walked away. She didn't know who Leander Quinton was. She didn't watch the news much, didn't follow society gossip. To her, he was just another person who needed help. She went home, washed the blood out of her mother's scarf, and made dinner. That should have been the end of it. 3 days later, flowers arrived at her apartment. Not a small bouquet, 24 white roses with a card in elegant handwriting. You saved my life. Let me thank you properly. Dinner? LQ, she almost threw them away. Rich people didn't date girls like her. Rich people wanted something, always. But curiosity won. She texted the number on the card. You don't owe me anything. He replied within seconds. I know. I want to. Please. What made her say yes? Maybe it was the please. Rich people rarely said please. Maybe it was the loneliness she'd gotten good at ignoring. Maybe it was just time for something different. She agreed to coffee instead of dinner. Coffee felt safer, easier to escape if things went wrong. Leander Quinton was handsome in that expensive way, tailored suit, perfect haircut, watch that cost more than her annual rent. But when he didn't talk about money. He asked about her volunteer work, her tutoring, what made her run toward danger when everyone else ran away. I don't know, she said honestly. I just couldn't stand there and do nothing. He leaned forward. Most people would have. Most people do. Something in his eyes looked genuine, vulnerable even. I've spent my whole life around people who calculate the cost of everything before they act. You didn't calculate. You just moved. That's rare. She sipped her coffee, uncomfortable with praise. Or just stupid, she said. He laughed, a real laugh, not the polite chuckle rich people give. No. Brave. There's a difference. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into walks through the city. Walks turned into late-night conversations where they talked about everything. Her childhood, his pressure-filled life running his family's empire, her dreams of maybe going back to school someday, his exhaustion with people who only saw his bank account. Everyone wants something from me, he admitted one night. Money, connections, status. You're the first person in years who looked at me and just saw a man bleeding who needed help. She understood that. Everyone pitied me growing up, she said. The poor orphan. I hated it. I just wanted someone to see me as more than my worst day. He reached across the table and took her hand. I see you, Serafina. I see exactly who you are. 6 months later, he proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant with photographers hiding in the wings. He did it in her tiny apartment, sitting on her second-hand couch, holding a ring that probably cost 6 figures. My mother's going to hate this, he said. She's got a whole list of women she thinks are suitable. Society girls. Old money. You're not on that list. Serafina started to pull her hand back, but he held tight. I don't care what's on her list. I care about you. Marry me. Not because of what I have or who I am. Marry me because when I'm with you, I'm the man I want to be instead of the man everyone expects. How do you say no to that? She said yes. She said yes even though warning bells whispered in the back of her mind. She said yes because she loved him, because she believed love could bridge any gap, because she'd survived worse things than a disapproving mother-in-law. Right? The wedding was small by Quinton standards, just immediate family and a few close friends. Leander's mother, Viviette Quinton, attended in black. Not navy, not charcoal, funeral black. She didn't smile during the ceremony. She didn't congratulate them at the reception. When Serafina tried to introduce herself properly, Viviette looked her up and down like she was examining a stain on an expensive carpet. So you're the girl my son rescued from poverty, Viviette said, voice dripping with condescension. How charitable of him. Leander stepped between them. Mother, don't. Viviette smiled, cold and sharp. Don't what, darling? I'm simply stating facts. This girl has no family, no education, no prospects. You could have had anyone. Instead, you chose a charity case. Serafina felt the old shame trying to crawl up her throat, but she swallowed it down. I may not have money, Mrs. Quinton, but I have something your money can't buy. I genuinely love your son. Viviette's smile never wavered. Love. How quaint. Let's see how long that lasts when you're living in my house, eating my food, breathing my air. She turned and walked away, leaving Serafina standing there, wedding dress suddenly feeling too tight. Leander squeezed her hand. She'll come around. She just needs time. But Serafina knew better. She'd seen that look before in the eyes of foster parents who never wanted her, in the faces of kids who decided she wasn't worth knowing. Viviette Quinton didn't need time. She'd already made her decision. The question was, could Serafina survive what came next? The Quinton mansion wasn't a home. It was a museum of wealth where Serafina was the unwanted exhibit. Marble floors, so polished, she could see her reflection looking lost and out of place. Crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. 16 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, staff quarters, a wine cellar that went down 2 floors. Leander carried her over the threshold like they were starting a fairy tale, but Viviette was waiting in the foyer with arms crossed and a smile that promised war. "Welcome to your new prison, dear," she said sweetly. "I do hope you'll try not to break anything. Everything here is worth more than you." The first dinner was a test Serafina didn't know she was taking. She'd spent all afternoon cooking, trying to prove herself, wanting to show Viviette she could be the daughter-in-law this family deserved. She made roasted chicken with herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, and homemade rolls. Simple food, but made with care. She set the dining table herself because the staff offered, and she felt too guilty letting them serve her. When Viviette sat down, she looked at the plate like Serafina had served her garbage. She took one bite of chicken, chewed slowly, then set down her fork with a deliberate click that echoed through the silent room. "Leander, darling, is your wife trying to poison us?" Viviette asked, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. "This is barely edible. I've had better meals at highway rest stops." Serafina's throat tightened. "I'm sorry, I thought." "You thought what?" "That peasant food would satisfy this family." Viviette pushed her plate away. "Mrs. Chun." The head chef appeared within seconds. "Please prepare something we can actually eat. And in the future, the kitchen is off limits to Mrs. Quinton Jr. We have standards to maintain." Leander said nothing. He looked uncomfortable, pushed food around his plate, but didn't defend her. That silence cut deeper than Viviette's words. After dinner, Serafina locked herself in their bedroom and cried into a pillow so no one would hear. When Leander finally came upstairs, she asked him the question that would haunt their marriage. "Why didn't you say anything?" He sat on the edge of the bed and wouldn't meet her eyes. "She's set in her ways. If I confront her, she'll just get worse. It's better to let her vent and eventually she'll calm down." Better for who? Serafina wanted to scream, but she didn't. She'd learned long ago that screaming changed nothing. The cruelty became routine, a daily ritual of humiliation disguised as family life. Viviette critiqued everything. The way Serafina walked. "Stop slouching, you look like a servant." The way she dressed. "Is that the only dress you own?" The way she spoke. "We don't use contractions in this house. Dear, we're not common." Every correction was delivered with a smile, always in front of staff or guests, always designed for maximum embarrassment. At charity galas, Viviette would introduce her as Leander's little project, or the girl he saved from the streets. When Serafina tried to contribute to conversations about art or literature, subjects she'd studied obsessively at the library growing up, Viviette would interrupt. "How charming that you have opinions." But perhaps leave the intellectual discussions to those of us with actual education. 3 months into the marriage, Serafina got pregnant. Joy flooded through her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Maybe this would change things. Maybe a grandchild would soften Viviette's heart. Maybe this baby would finally make her belong. She told Leander first, and he cried actual tears of happiness. "We're going to be parents," he whispered, holding her close. "Everything's going to be different now." They told Viviette together at breakfast. Serafina watched her mother-in-law's face carefully, hoping to see warmth, acceptance, anything human. Instead, Viviette set down her coffee cup and said, "Well, I suppose even broken clocks are right twice a day. Let's hope you can actually carry it to term." The words were bullets Serafina wasn't prepared for. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. Viviette smiled, that razor-blade smile. "Simply that breeding and raising children require a certain constitution. Let's not count our chickens before they hatch." 8 weeks later, Serafina started bleeding. The cramps came in waves, so intense she couldn't stand. Leander rushed her to the hospital, but the doctors' faces told the story before their words did. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Quinton. There's no heartbeat." The world turned gray. She'd lost the baby. She'd lost her hope. She'd lost the one thing that might have made her worthy in Viviette's eyes. When they returned home, Viviette was waiting in the sitting room with tea and that permanent expression of disappointment. "I heard the news. Such a shame. But perhaps it's for the best. Clearly your body isn't equipped for this." Serafina stood frozen, grief and rage wrestling inside her. "How can you say that?" she whispered. "How can you be so cruel?" Viviette sipped her tea calmly. "I'm not cruel, dear. I'm realistic. You come from weak stock. Your body is telling you what I've known all along. You're not built for this family." Leander finally found his spine. "Mother, that's enough." Viviette didn't even flinch. "Is it? Your wife has one job in this family. Provide an heir. She can't even do that. What exactly is she good for?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. Leander opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Serafina with helpless eyes that told her everything. He didn't have an answer. He didn't know what she was good for either. That night, lying in bed next to a husband who'd failed to defend her when it mattered most, Serafina made a decision. She'd try again. She'd get pregnant again. She'd prove Viviette wrong or die trying. Because what else did she have? Where else could she go? She'd survived foster care, survived being alone, and survived poverty. Surely she could survive this. The second pregnancy came 6 months later. This time Serafina didn't tell anyone until she was 12 weeks along, and didn't let herself hope until she felt the baby kick. When she finally shared the news, Viviette's reaction was a bored, "How nice," followed by an immediate subject change. But at 14 weeks, the bleeding started again. Different this time, faster, more violent. The hospital, the same sympathetic doctors, the same gray world closing in. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Quinton. These things happen." But they didn't just happen. They happened to her. Twice. Viviette's words at dinner that night were delivered with surgical precision. "Twice now. Twice your body has rejected pregnancy. Do you know what we call that, dear? We call that barren. You're barren. Broken. Defective." Serafina's hands shook so hard she had to grip the table. The doctor said it's not uncommon that the doctors can say whatever makes you feel better. But facts are facts. My son married a woman who can't give him children. What a tragic waste of the Quinton name. Can you imagine enduring that kind of cruelty while grieving your own children? The third pregnancy happened almost a year later. Serafina had stopped hoping by then, stopped dreaming, stopped believing in fairy tales. But her body tried anyway, one last desperate attempt. This time she told no one. She hid the pregnancy as long as she could, wore loose clothing, avoided family dinners, and stayed in her room. But at 16 weeks, the familiar cramping started and she knew. She knew before the blood came, before the hospital confirmed it, before the doctors gave their condolences. 3 miscarriages. 3 babies she'd never hold. 3 failures that Viviette would never let her forget. The day she came home from losing the 3rd baby, Viviette hosted a dinner party. Serafina stayed upstairs, too broken to face people, but Viviette sent a maid to summon her. "Mrs. Quinton Sr. insists you join the party. She says it's rude to hide." Serafina went downstairs in a fog of grief and medication. The moment she entered the dining room, Viviette announced to the entire table of guests, "Ah, here she is. My daughter-in-law. 3 times pregnant, 3 times failed. We've started calling her the family disappointment. Isn't that right, Leander?" The guests laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke. Leander stared at his plate. Serafina stood there, humiliation burning through her like acid, and something inside her cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like a dam developing its first fracture before the flood. She turned and walked out without a word, and for the first time since entering this mansion, she didn't cry. She'd run out of tears. All that remained was a quiet, cold rage that would eventually consume everything. But life wasn't done testing her. 2 months later, her body surprised her one final time. Another pregnancy. This one felt different, stronger, more persistent. She didn't tell anyone. She barely acknowledged it herself. But as weeks turned to months, and the baby kept growing, kept fighting, kept surviving, something changed in Serafina. This child was a warrior like her. This child refused to give up. And maybe, just maybe, this child was the reason she'd endured everything else. When she finally couldn't hide it anymore, at 5 months, Leander noticed. "Are you?" He couldn't finish the question, afraid of the answer. "Yes," she said simply. No joy in her voice, no hope, just fact. He reached for her, and she stepped back. Don't pretend this changes anything. Don't pretend you'll defend this baby any better than you defended me." He looked wounded, but didn't argue, because they both knew it was true. When Viviette found out, her reaction was worse than cruelty. It was strategic. "Well," she said, studying Serafina's stomach with calculating eyes, "I suppose we'll see if the 4th time's the charm. But dear, even if you manage to carry it, do you really think one child will erase 3 failures? Do you think that makes you mother material?" Serafina met her gaze without flinching. "I guess we'll find out." Something in her tone must have registered because for once, Viviette looked uncertain. The girl she'd spent 2 years destroying was showing cracks. Yes, but not the kind that crumbled. The kind that let light through. The kind that preceded earthquakes. But Viviette was too arrogant to recognize the warning signs. She was too busy planning the final humiliation to notice that Serafina Halvorsen had stopped breaking and started sharpening herself into a blade. The pregnancy progressed, and with each passing week, Serafina felt stronger, clearer, more focused. She began paying attention to things she'd ignored before. The whispered phone calls Viviette made behind closed doors, the documents left carelessly on her desk, the way certain financial advisors visited the house at odd hours. She started taking notes in a small journal she hid in her room. Not revenge, not yet. Just information. Just insurance. Just survival instincts honed over a lifetime of being underestimated. When you've been counted out your whole life, you learn to notice when people think you're not paying attention. And Serafina was paying very close attention now. 9 months. Serafina carried that baby for 9 months, while Viviette circled like a vulture waiting for failure. But this baby was a fighter. Every kick, every hiccup, every flutter reminded Serafina that she was stronger than anyone believed. The due date arrived on a Tuesday in February, in the middle of the worst winter storm in 20 years. Serafina's water broke at 3 in the morning. She shook Leander awake, and his face went white with panic. "It's time. We need to go now." They rushed to the hospital through streets buried in snow, Serafina breathing through contractions that felt like her body was tearing in half. The pain was unimaginable, but she welcomed it because pain meant progress, meant her baby was coming, meant she'd finally prove to everyone, especially herself, that she wasn't broken. Labor lasted 18 hours. 18 hours of agony, while nurses checked monitors and doctors murmured about complications. Leander held her hand for the first 6 hours, then started checking his phone. "I need to make some calls," he said, slipping out of the room. He came back an hour later smelling like expensive cologne he hadn't been wearing before. Serafina was too exhausted to question it. All her focus was on the baby, on surviving, on the finish line that kept moving further away. Finally, at 9:47 p.m., after pushing so hard she thought she'd die, her daughter entered the world screaming. The doctor placed her on Serafina's chest and time stopped. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a full head of dark hair, and lungs that could wake the dead. "Ilara," Serafina whispered, the name she'd chosen months ago but never said out loud, afraid to jinx it. "Your name is Ilara. You're here. You're real. You're mine." The nurse took Ilara to clean her up and do tests, promising to bring her back soon. Serafina lay there, body destroyed, but heart fuller than it had ever been. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Against 3 miscarriages, against Viviette's cruelty, against every odds stacked against her. She'd brought life into this world. For the first time in years, She felt something close to pride. Then the door opened and her world exploded. Leander walked in, but he wasn't alone. Behind him came Viviette, wearing a black dress like she was attending a funeral. And beside them, draped in a cream-colored coat with designer boots and diamond earrings that caught the fluorescent light, was a woman Serafina had never seen before. Young, 23 maybe, with the kind of beauty that came from expensive procedures and monthly spa treatments. She looked at Serafina like someone might look at a stray dog, with pity and disgust mixed together. Leander. Serafina's voice cracked with exhaustion and confusion. What's going on? He wouldn't meet her eyes. Viviette stepped forward, holding a manila envelope. Serafina, dear, we need to discuss your future. Or rather, your lack of one in this family. The room tilted. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not while her body still trembled from bringing life into the world. I don't understand, Serafina whispered. Viviette smiled that razor-blade smile Serafina had learned to fear. It's quite simple. My son is divorcing you. Today. Right now. These are the papers. She dropped the envelope on the hospital bed like it was trash. All you need to do is sign. The words didn't make sense. Serafina looked at Leander, waiting for him to laugh, to tell her it was a sick joke, to be the man she'd fallen in love with. Leander, tell her this is crazy. Tell her, I'm sorry, Serafina. His voice was flat, rehearsed, like he'd practiced this speech. This isn't working. It never worked. My mother was right. You're not suited for this life. You've tried, I'll give you that, but trying isn't enough. The young woman in the cream coat stepped closer, sliding her arm through Leander's with possessive confidence. Who is this? Serafina demanded, though part of her already knew, already understood that this humiliation had been planned down to the last detail. This is Callista Brennan, Viviette announced proudly. She comes from excellent stock, the Brennan banking family. Old money, proper breeding, everything we should have insisted on from the beginning. She'll be Leander's wife within the month, and she'll give him the family you never could. Can you imagine? Can you imagine giving birth, your body still bleeding and broken, and being told you're being replaced? Serafina tried to sit up, but pain shot through her abdomen. I just had your baby. Your daughter is down the hall right now. How can you? That child is precisely the problem, Viviette interrupted coldly. She's proof that you trapped my son with pregnancy. Well, congratulations, you got your 9 months. But this family needs more than one sickly child from weak genetics. Callista is young, healthy, and fertile. She'll give Leander multiple heirs. You've served your purpose. Serafina's hands curled into fists in the sheets. You can't do this. We're married. That's my baby. Sign the papers, Serafina. Leander finally looked at her, and his eyes were dead. You'll get nothing. No alimony, no property, no support. Those are the terms. Sign them and walk away quietly, or I'll make this so ugly you'll wish you had. The threat hung in the sterile air. Serafina looked at the envelope, at the woman wearing her husband's arm like a prize, at Viviette's triumphant face. 3 years of hell crystallized into this single moment. And Alara, she asked, voice barely above a whisper. What about my daughter? She stays with us, Viviette declared. She's Quentin. She'll be raised properly, not by some orphan with no family and no prospects. Every cell in Serafina's body screamed no. Every instinct told her to fight, to scratch, to claw, to burn the hospital down before letting them take her child. But she was one woman, exhausted and bleeding, against a family with unlimited money and lawyers who could twist any law to their favor. If she fought now, she'd lose. If she fought now, they'd destroy her and take Alara anyway. So she did the only thing survival had taught her to do. She retreated to fight another day. I want to see her first, Serafina said. I want to hold my daughter one more time before I sign anything. Viviette checked her watch impatiently. Fine. 5 minutes. Then we're done here. A nurse brought Alara back, wrapped in a hospital blanket, sleeping peacefully with no idea her world had just shattered. Serafina took her daughter and pressed her close, memorizing every detail. The shape of her ears, the curve of her tiny nose, the way her fingers curled like little seashells. She kissed her forehead and whispered words only Alara would hear. I'm not giving up. This isn't over. I will come back for you. I promise. Then she handed her baby to the nurse before she could change her mind, before the screaming in her head became screaming out loud. She signed the papers with shaking hands, her signature barely legible through the tears she refused to let fall. Good girl, Viviette said, taking the papers like she'd won a prize. Now get out. You have 1 hour to leave this hospital before security removes you. Serafina pushed herself out of the bed, her body screaming in protest. Every step toward the door was agony, but she refused to show weakness, refused to give them the satisfaction. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. Leander was already cooing over Alara with Callista, playing house with the replacement family. He didn't even glance at the woman who'd just birthed his child. That image burned itself into Serafina's memory like a brand. The hospital discharged her with a plastic bag of supplies and instructions to rest for 6 weeks. Rest where? She had no home now, no money, no phone. They'd taken everything, even her coat. The head nurse, an older woman with kind eyes who'd seen the whole thing, pulled her aside. I don't know what happened there, but no woman should be thrown out after giving birth. Here. She pressed $200 into Serafina's hand. That's all I have. Get somewhere safe. Get help. Serafina wanted to refuse, pride still fighting against reality. But pride didn't keep you alive. Thank you, she whispered. I'll pay you back. The nurse squeezed her shoulder. Just survive, honey. That's enough payment. Outside, the storm had gotten worse. Snow fell in thick sheets, the kind of cold that cuts through skin and finds bone. Serafina stood on the hospital steps in a thin gown and borrowed scrubs, a small suitcase in one hand, everything she owned fit in one bag again, just like when she was 10, and climbed into a cab. Where to? The driver asked. She gave him the address of a women's shelter she'd volunteered at years ago, praying they had space, praying they'd take her in. The drive through the storm felt like traveling through hell frozen over. Every bump in the road sent pain through her healing body. Every red light gave her too much time to think about Alara sleeping in a hospital basement, unaware her mother was being erased from her life. When they pulled up to the shelter, Serafina paid the driver with the nurse's cash and stepped out into the blizzard. The shelter almost didn't let her in. We're at capacity, the intake worker said. But when Serafina collapsed against the desk, blood seeping through her scrubs, they found space. They gave her a cot in a room with 7 other women, a thin blanket, and a promise to check her stitches in the morning. Serafina lay there in the dark, listening to strangers breathe, her body empty where life had been hours ago, her arms empty where her daughter should have been. This was rock bottom. This was the moment where most people would break completely, would give up, would let the story end. But Serafina wasn't most people. She'd survived losing her parents at 10. She'd survived the foster system. She'd survived 3 miscarriages and 3 years of Viviette's torture. She'd survive this too. More than survive, she'd rise. She'd take back everything they'd stolen. She'd burn their world to ash and dance in the embers. That night, shivering in a shelter cot while her daughter slept in a mansion built on cruelty, Serafina Halvorsen made a vow. She would become untouchable. She would become powerful. She would become the nightmare the Quinton family never saw coming. They thought they'd destroyed her. They thought they'd won. They had no idea they'd just created the storm that would destroy them all. And somewhere in her exhausted, broken body, buried beneath pain and grief and rage, a single thought pulsed like a heartbeat. They don't know about the inheritance. They don't know about my father. They don't know I own the house they just threw me out of. They don't know anything. And that ignorance would be their undoing. 3 days after giving birth, still bleeding and barely able to walk, Serafina received a visitor at the shelter. A man in an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase, looking completely out of place among the donated furniture and peeling paint. Serafina Halvorsen? His voice was formal, careful. She was folding donated clothes on her cot, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life from nothing. Who's asking? He handed her a business card. Gregory Ashford, senior partner, Ashford and Associates, estate law. I've been searching for you for 3 years. Your father's estate has finally cleared probate. The card trembled in her hands. My father? My father died 18 years ago. There was no estate. There was nothing. Gregory sat in the plastic chair across from her, opened his briefcase, and pulled out documents thick enough to be a novel. Your father was Marcus Halvorson. Does that name mean anything to you? She shook her head, confused and exhausted. He died when I was 10. Car accident. Both my parents. I went into foster care because there was no one else, no money, nothing. Gregory's expression softened. That's what you were told. The truth is more complicated. Your father was Marcus Halvorson of Halvorson Industries, tech patents, real estate holdings, international investments. When he died, his business partner initiated a lengthy legal battle over the estate, claiming your father owed him money. The courts froze everything while they sorted it out. You were placed in foster care because no one could access the funds to care for you. The case dragged on for years, appeals, countersuits, international jurisdiction issues. It just concluded 6 months ago. Your father's partner lost. The estate is yours. All of it. The words bounced off Serafina's brain like she was hearing a foreign language. How much, she whispered. Gregory met her eyes. $1.3 billion. Give or take a few million depending on current stock valuations. The room spun. $1.3 billion. She'd been eating donated soup and sleeping on a cot while sitting on a fortune that could buy 1,000 hospitals. That's impossible. If my father had that much money, someone would have told me. Someone would have found me. They tried, Gregory said gently, multiple times. But you kept moving, different foster homes, different schools, different names sometimes when the system messed up paperwork. By the time you aged out at 18, you'd essentially disappeared into low-income housing and cash jobs. No credit cards, no permanent address, no paper trail. The investigators finally tracked you down through your marriage license to Leander Quinton. That's how I found you. Serafina's mind raced through implications. Does anyone else know? The Quintons, do they know? No one knows except me and my firm. We're legally obligated to keep client information confidential. This is your information to share or keep private as you see fit. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep and broken inside her. They kicked me out of my own house. Gregory frowned. I'm sorry. The Quinton mansion. I looked up the property records when I was bored one afternoon. It's part of my father's real estate portfolio, isn't it? They've been living in my house, eating my food, and spending my money for 3 years while calling me a charity case. Gregory flipped through documents, found the right page. The property at 1847 Blackstone Avenue. Yes, that's one of your holdings. Your father purchased it 22 years ago as an investment property. He rented it to the Quinton family on a long-term lease. The lease actually expired 8 months ago, but no one renewed it because no one could locate you to authorize it. Legally, they're squatting. The irony was so sharp it could cut diamonds. Viviette had thrown her out of her own property. Every insult about being poor, every reminder that she lived on their charity, every condescending word about her place in their home, all of it had been built on a lie. They were the ones living on her charity. They just didn't know it. What else? Serafina asked. What else is in the estate? Gregory pulled out a folder 2 inches thick. 347 properties across 12 countries. Stock portfolios in major corporations. A private island off the coast of Greece. Art collection valued at $80 million. And this. He handed her a separate file marked confidential in red letters. Your father kept detailed records of his business dealings, including financial transactions with Viviette Quinton. Serafina opened the file with shaking hands. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, forged documents, evidence of embezzlement going back 15 years. What am I looking at? Your father was investigating Viviette before he died. He suspected she was stealing from a charity fund they co-managed. He documented everything. The fake invoices, the shell companies, the offshore accounts. He was planning to go to the authorities the week he died. The car accident that killed your parents? The police report is in there too. Read page 7. Serafina flipped pages until she found it. The investigating officer had noted inconsistencies with the brake lines, but the case was closed due to insufficient evidence, and signed off by a detective who, according to a note in her father's handwriting, was Viviette's cousin. Are you saying Viviette killed my parents? The question came out calm, cold, nothing like the scream building in her chest. I'm saying your father believed someone tampered with his car, and he believed Viviette had motive and means. I can't prove murder. The evidence is circumstantial and too old. But I can prove embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. The statute of limitations hasn't run out on the financial crimes. You could destroy her legally and financially tomorrow if you wanted. Serafina closed the file, her hands steady now, her mind crystallizing into sharp focus. What do I need to do to access everything? Gregory pulled out more papers. Sign here, here, and here. I'll need proof of identity, driver's license, birth certificate. Then we transfer everything into your name. The full process takes about 3 weeks to finalize, but I can release emergency funds today. How much do you need? How much did she need? A week ago, she would have said $1,000, felt like a fortune. Now she had access to more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. Enough to rent an apartment, buy clothes, hire a nanny. She paused. And enough to hire the best custody lawyer in the state. Gregory smiled for the first time. I already anticipated that. I took the liberty of contacting Rebecca Chun. She's the top family law attorney in the country, never losing a custody case. She's expecting your call. He handed her a phone, new, expensive, already programmed with numbers. This is yours, untraceable to your old identity. I've also arranged for a security detail until we're sure the Quintons don't pose a physical threat. Security. The word felt foreign. You're a billionaire now, Ms. Halvorson. People do desperate things when money and power are at stake. The Quintons may not know about your inheritance yet, but when they find out, and they will, you need to be protected. The pieces were falling into place, a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. I need 6 weeks before anyone knows. 6 weeks to heal, to plan, to prepare. Can you keep this quiet that long? Attorney-client privilege, Gregory confirmed. No one hears a word unless you authorize it. But Ms. Halvorson, what exactly are you planning? She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much, survived too much, and were finally ready to take instead of lose. I'm planning to take back my daughter. And then I'm going to take everything else. The next 3 days were a blur of paperwork, bank accounts, and strategic planning. Gregory set her up in a penthouse apartment under a shell corporation name. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place she'd cleaned as a volunteer, but never imagined living in. He arranged for a personal shopper to stock her closet, a nutritionist to help her heal properly, and a private nurse to check her recovery. For the first time in her life, Serafina had everything she'd ever needed. Except the one thing that mattered, her daughter. Rebecca Chin came to the apartment on day 4, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper reputation. I've reviewed your case. Divorced in a hospital bed hours after giving birth. Coerced into signing away custody. Thrown out with no support. Any judge will see it's unconscionable. She spread documents across the dining table. But here's the problem. They have temporary custody. And challenging it means exposing yourself. The moment we file, they'll know you have resources. Let them know, Serafina said. I'm done hiding. Rebecca studied her carefully. The Quintons will fight dirty. They'll drag your past through the mud. Foster care, no family, no education, no job history. They'll paint you as unstable, unfit, dangerous. Then we paint them as criminals. Serafina pushed the embezzlement file across the table. Viviette's been stealing for 15 years. I have proof. We expose her, we destroy their credibility, and we take back my daughter. Rebecca's eyes widened as she read. This is enough to put her in prison for 20 years. Good. File the custody motion and include the financial evidence. hit them with everything at once so they can't prepare. When? Rebecca asked. They're having a wedding in 6 weeks. Leander and his replacement wife. Big society event, 500 guests, every newspaper in the city covering it. That's when we strike. Rebecca smiled, the kind of smile a shark makes before it bites. You want to ruin them at their own wedding. That's bold. They ruined me in a delivery room, Serafina said quietly. Seems only fair I return the favor somewhere equally public. They spent the next hour mapping strategy, motions to file, evidence to present, witnesses to depose. Rebecca left with a retainer check for $500,000 and a promise to bury the Quintons so deep they'd need archaeologists to find them. Alone in her penthouse, Serafina walked to the window and looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Ilara was sleeping in a mansion that didn't belong to the people raising her. Somewhere out there, Viviette was celebrating a victory she hadn't actually won. And somewhere out there, Leander was planning a wedding that would become his funeral. The old Serafina, the one who'd cooked dinner hoping to earn love, who'd endured insults hoping for acceptance, who'd signed divorce papers because she was too broken to fight, that woman was gone. She'd died in a labor room and been reborn in a shelter cot with nothing but rage and determination. This new Serafina had money, power, proof of crimes, and 6 weeks to become untouchable. She'd spent her whole life being underestimated. Let them keep underestimating her for 6 more weeks. Let them plan their parties and count their victories and believe they'd win. Because when she was done transforming herself into the weapon they'd forced her to become, there wouldn't be enough left of the Quinton family to fill a dustpan. Serafina pressed her hand against the cold window and whispered a promise to the city, to herself, to the daughter she'd get back. I'm coming. And hell's coming with me. 6 weeks. That's all the time Serafina had to transform from a woman who'd been thrown away like garbage into someone the Quinton family would fear. She spent the first week just healing, physically at least. Her body needed time to recover from birth and the trauma of that night. But her mind? Her mind was a machine now, processing every detail, planning every move, calculating every angle. The private nurse came daily to check her stitches and monitor her recovery. You're healing remarkably well, the nurse said on day 8. Most women, after what you went through, would still be bedridden. Serafina smiled without warmth. Most women have something to rest for. I have something to fight for. Week 2 began her real education. Gregory connected her with Marcus Chun, a corporate strategist who'd built and destroyed more fortunes than most people could count. Marcus came to her penthouse carrying nothing but a tablet and a reputation for being brutal. Mr. Ashford says you want to learn business in 6 weeks. That's impossible. He set his tablet on her dining table with a decisive click. But I can teach you enough to not look like a fool, and enough to terrify anyone who underestimates you. They started with the basics, how to read financial statements, how corporations hide money, how the wealthy protect assets. Serafina absorbed everything like her life depended on it, because it did. Marcus would drill her for 8 hours straight, throwing scenarios at her until she could respond without thinking. The Quintons try to freeze your accounts. What do? Move everything to offshore trusts they can't touch. They claim you're mentally unstable. How do you respond? Release my psychiatric evaluation showing perfect mental health, and subpoena their family therapy records. They try to settle privately to avoid scandal. Do you take it? Never. Public destruction or nothing. By week 3, Serafina wasn't just learning business, she was learning war. Marcus brought in a media consultant named Patricia, who'd managed crisis communications for presidents and CEOs. The narrative is everything, Patricia explained, spreading newspapers across the table showing various scandal stories. Whoever controls the story controls the outcome. The Quintons will try to paint you as a gold digger who trapped their son. We need to paint you as the victim who survived. They crafted her story carefully. The orphan who saved a man's life, married for love, endured years of abuse, lost 3 babies to stress and cruelty, then got divorced while giving birth. Every word was true, but arranged for maximum emotional impact. When we release this, the public will crucify them, Patricia said with satisfaction. Especially older women. They'll see themselves in you. Every woman who's been underestimated, discarded, replaced. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for every woman who's been treated like garbage by people with power. Week 4 brought physical transformation. A stylist named Andre came to the penthouse with racks of designer clothes, none of which looked like anything Serafina would have chosen. "We're not dressing the woman you were," Andre said, circling her with an artist's sigh. "We're dressing the woman you're becoming." Power doesn't apologize. Power doesn't hide. Power walks into a room and makes everyone else feel like they're underdressed. He put her in tailored suits that cost more than a car, dresses that moved like water, heels that added 3 inches and made her spine straighten automatically. But the real change was her hair. He cut off the long, mousy brown she'd been hiding behind her whole life and styled it into a sharp bob that framed her face like a weapon. When she looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back. This woman looked dangerous. This woman looked like she could ruin lives before breakfast and still have time for coffee. The physical training started week 5. "You need to look strong, not fragile," her trainer James explained. "Not bodybuilder strong, CEO strong. The kind of strength that says, I could destroy you, but I'm too busy to bother." They worked on posture first. How to stand so people instinctively moved out of her way. How to sit so she commanded attention. How to walk into a room like she owned it, because technically she did own most rooms now. James made her practice her entrance 50 times. Again, your shoulders are apologizing. Stop apologizing with your body. You own the air you breathe. By the end of week 5, Serafina could walk into a space and make it hers without saying a word. Her presence had weight now, gravity that pulled attention whether people wanted to give it or not. Rebecca Chin checked in weekly with updates on the legal strategy. "We filed a custody motion the morning of the wedding," she confirmed in their week 5 meeting. The financial evidence hits the news simultaneously. By the time they're walking down the aisle, the whole city will know Viviette's a criminal, and Leander abandoned his newborn. Serafina listened to the plan, made adjustments, and pushed for more. "I want Viviette arrested at the wedding. Can we arrange that?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow. The optics of police showing up during a society wedding? That's aggressive even for me. "Can you do it?" Serafina pressed. "If the evidence is submitted to the DA's office with time-sensitive concerns, if we frame it as flight risk given her wealth, yes. I can probably make it happen." Then make it happen. Week 6 was for final preparations and one more crucial element, reconnecting with Alara. Rebecca had secured supervised visitation rights pending the custody hearing. The Quintons couldn't legally deny it once the motion was filed. On day 38, Serafina walked into a neutral location, a family services office with cheerful yellow walls that felt like a mockery, and saw her daughter for the first time since that hospital room. Alara was 6 weeks old now, bigger than Serafina, remembered, more alert. A state-appointed supervisor sat in the corner with a clipboard while Serafina held her baby and tried not to cry. "Hi, sweet girl. It's Mama. I'm here. I never left, not really. I've been getting ready to bring you home." Alara's tiny hand wrapped around Serafina's finger and squeezed. In that moment, every dollar, every lesson, every painful hour of preparation became worth it. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about this child having a mother who was strong enough to protect her. The visit lasted 2 hours. When the supervisor said time was up, Serafina kissed Alara's forehead and made her a promise. "Next time I see you, you're coming home with me. I promise." She handed her daughter back to the care worker who'd brought her, watched them leave, then walked outside where her driver was waiting with the Mercedes. The old Serafina would have cried. The new Serafina called Rebecca. "Accelerate everything. I want them buried. The wedding's in 5 days. We're on schedule. I don't care about the schedule. I want them destroyed before they finish their vows." Those final 5 days moved like a storm building. Serafina reviewed every document, memorized every detail, practiced her entrance to the wedding until it was perfect. Patricia leaked strategic pieces of the story to journalists who'd been cultivated for exactly this moment. Marcus confirmed all assets were protected and positioned. Gregory assured her the legal walls around the Quintons were airtight. Everything was ready. The only question left was, would she have the strength to walk into that wedding, face the people who destroyed her, and burn their world down in front of 500 witnesses? On day 42, the morning of the wedding, Serafina woke before dawn and stood at her penthouse window watching the sunrise. The woman who'd survived foster care, poverty, cruelty, and betrayal had spent 6 weeks becoming someone new, someone powerful, someone untouchable, someone who knew exactly how much she was worth and refused to ever be underestimated again. She dressed in a custom ivory suit, not white like a bride, not black like mourning, but something in between that screamed elegance and danger. Andre had called it the color of revenge served cold. Her hair was perfect, makeup minimal but precise, heels that made her tall enough to look Viviette in the eye. She looked like money. She looked like power. She looked like the reckoning the Quintons had spent 6 weeks not preparing for. Gregory called at 8 a.m. Everything's filed. The custody motion is public record as of 10 minutes ago. The financial evidence is with the DA. News outlets have the story. It's done. Are you ready? Serafina looked at herself one final time in the mirror. The scared girl who'd signed divorce papers in a hospital bed was gone completely. In her place stood a woman who'd lost everything and used that loss to forge herself into something unbreakable. "I've been ready my whole life," she said. "Let's go ruin a wedding." The Quinton estate looked like a fairy tale. White tents with crystal chandeliers, thousands of roses imported from Ecuador, a string quartet playing Vivaldi, champagne towers that cost more than most people's yearly salary. 500 guests in designer clothes sipped expensive wine and pretended they hadn't gossiped viciously about this exact wedding for weeks. Leander stood at the altar in a custom tuxedo, looking every bit the conquering hero. Callista waited in the bridal suite, probably admiring herself in a dress that cost $250,000. And Viviette circulated through the crowd like a queen, accepting congratulations on ridding her family of that dreadful mistake and securing proper breeding for the Quinton line. They had no idea the sky was about to fall on their heads. Serafina's Mercedes pulled up to the estate at exactly 2 p.m., 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to start. Her security team stepped out first, 3 men in dark suits who looked like they ate problems for breakfast. Then she emerged, holding 6-week-old Alara wrapped in a cashmere blanket. The valet's face went white. "Ma'am, this is a private event. I own this property," Serafina said calmly, handing him her keys. "Park the car." She walked past him before he could respond, her heels clicking on the marble entrance like a countdown to detonation. The moment she entered the main hall, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Someone dropped a champagne glass, and it shattered on the floor, the sound echoing through sudden silence. Viviette spotted her first. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here? Get out." Security. But Serafina's security team was already blocking the exits, and more importantly, every guest in the room had pulled out their phones. This was going to be recorded, shared, and viral within hours. Perfect. "Hello, Viviette," Serafina said, her voice carrying across the hall like she owned the acoustics, which she did. "Lovely party. I hope you don't mind me crashing. After all, this is my house." The whispers started immediately. Did she say her house? Is that the ex-wife? Is that a baby? Viviette's face cycled through shock, rage, and fear before settling on venomous contempt. "You have no right to be here. You signed away everything." "I signed away nothing that was yours to take," Serafina interrupted. "And that's the problem, isn't it? Nothing here was ever yours." Leander pushed through the crowd, Callista clutching his arm like a life preserver. He looked good in his tuxedo, but his eyes betrayed panic. "Serafina, what are you doing? You can't what, Leander? Can't show up to my own property? Can't bring our daughter to see her father get remarried 6 weeks after abandoning us both? Can't tell 500 people the truth about this family?" She adjusted Alara in her arms, and the baby's eyes, Leander's eyes, stared at her father like an accusation. That baby shouldn't be here, Callista hissed, her pretty face twisted with anger. This is our day, your day. Serafina laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Tell me, Callista, did Leander mention he divorced me in a labor room? Did he tell you he handed me papers while I was still bleeding from giving birth? Did he mention throwing me into a snowstorm with our newborn because his mother decided I wasn't good enough? The crowd gasped. Phones recorded every word. This was better than any reality show, any scandal, any gossip they'd heard in years. Callista's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's not, Leander. Tell her that's not true. But Leander's silence was confirmation enough. You didn't know. Serafina asked with mock sympathy. You didn't know you're marrying a man who discards women when his mother snaps her fingers? Good luck with that. I give it 6 months before you're standing where I am. Viviette recovered her composure, stepping forward with fury blazing. Enough of this circus. You're embarrassing yourself. Guards, remove this woman. Touch me, and I'll sue this estate for every penny it has, Serafina said coldly. Oh, wait, every penny it has is mine. Let me rephrase. Touch me, and you'll be arrested for assault on private property. My private property. What are you talking about? Viviette demanded. This estate belongs to the Quinton family. We've lived here for 15 years, on my father's lease, which expired 8 months ago. Serafina pulled a document from her bag with her free hand, difficult with a baby, but she'd practiced this. Marcus Halvorsen purchased this property 22 years ago. I'm Marcus Halvorsen's only heir. I own this house, the grounds, and everything on it. You've been squatting for almost a year. She handed the property deed to the nearest guest, who stared at it like a bomb. Pass it around. Let everyone see. The document circulated through the crowd. Reality was hitting them in waves. This wasn't a desperate ex-wife making a scene. This was a property owner crashing squatters. You're lying, Viviette said, but her voice shook. My lawyers would have told me. Your lawyers probably did tell you the lease was up. You ignored it because you assumed the owner would never surface. Surprise. Serafina shifted Alara higher on her shoulder. The baby made small noises, completely unconcerned with the chaos erupting around her. But we're not here to discuss real estate. We're here to discuss theft, embezzlement, and fraud spanning 15 years. She nodded to Gregory, who'd slipped in through the side entrance with Rebecca Chin and a man in a police uniform. You remember my father's charity fund? The one you managed together? Want to tell everyone where that money went? Viviette's face went from pale to gray. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I have bank statements showing $2.7 million transferred from the charity to your personal accounts through shell companies. I have fake invoices for services never rendered. I have offshore accounts in your name. I have 15 years of evidence that you've been stealing from sick children. Serafina's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. I also have evidence suggesting you knew about my father's investigation before he died. The car accident that killed my parents? The brake lines were tampered with. And the detective who closed the case as accidental? Your cousin. Funny coincidence, don't you think? The crowd erupted. Gasps turned to shouts. Guests backed away from Viviette like she was radioactive. Callista yanked her arm free from Leander and stumbled backward, her wedding dress dragging through spilled champagne. This is insane. She's making this up, Leander. Tell them she's crazy. But Leander looked like he was going to vomit. He knew. Not all of it maybe, but enough. Enough to realize his mother was a criminal, and his ex-wife had just become untouchable. Mrs. Viviette Quinton, the police officer, stepped forward, handcuffs already out. You're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent. You can't do this. Viviette shrieked, backing away. Do you know who I am? I'll have your badge. I'll sue you for everything. With what money? Serafina asked. Because as of this morning, every account you have is frozen. Every asset is under investigation. Every property you thought you owned? Seized pending trial. Can you imagine? Can you imagine planning the perfect wedding to celebrate destroying someone, only to have that someone show up and destroy you instead? Viviette tried to run, but the officer caught her easily. The handcuffs clicked shut, and the sound echoed through the hall like a death knell. Cameras flashed. Videos recorded. This was going to be on every news channel within the hour. The great Viviette Quinton, society maven and charity darling, arrested at her son's wedding for stealing from children. Serafina turned to Leander, who stood frozen in the wreckage of his perfect day. "You should have defended me," she said quietly. "When your mother called me barren after I lost our babies. When she served me divorce papers in a hospital bed. When she threw me into a storm with our newborn. You should have stood up for me. But you didn't. So I learned to stand up for myself." "Serafina, please." He reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't pretend you care now. You made your choice. You chose comfort over courage, your mother over your wife, your image over your daughter. Now live with it." She looked at Callista, who was sobbing in her wedding dress, mascara running down her face. "And you thought you were stealing a prize. Congratulations, you won against a coward who abandons his family when things get hard. Enjoy your fairy tale." Rebecca stepped forward with a folder. "Mr. Quinton, you're being served with custody papers. Full custody of Alara reverts to her mother effective immediately. Supervised visitation only, pending investigation into the circumstances of the divorce and your fitness as a parent." Leander took the papers with shaking hands. "You can't take her from me. You took her from me first," Serafina said. "In a hospital room while I was bleeding and helpless. Now, you know how it feels." She turned to address the entire hall, 500 people who'd come for a wedding and gotten a revolution instead. "I know what you all thought about me. The poor girl who got lucky. The charity case who trapped a rich man. The woman who wasn't good enough for this family. You were wrong. I was never the one who wasn't good enough. They weren't good enough for me." She adjusted Alara one more time, kissed her daughter's forehead, and walked toward the exit. Her security team fell into formation around her. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. "Oh, and Leander? You have 30 days to remove your belongings from my property. After that, anything left behind becomes mine, just like everything else you threw away." The Mercedes was waiting. Serafina slid into the back seat, Alara secured in her arms, and the door closed on the chaos behind her. Through the tinted windows, she could see police leading Viviette away in handcuffs, see Callista collapsed on the ground in her ruined dress, see Leander standing alone in his tuxedo, surrounded by guests who couldn't wait to gossip about this disaster. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Where to, ma'am?" Serafina looked down at Alara, who gazed up at her with complete trust, completely unaware she'd just witnessed her mother burn down an empire. "Home," Serafina said. "Take us home." The wedding massacre was just the opening move. Within 48 hours, Serafina's legal team had filed 17 separate lawsuits against the Quinton family. Each one was a surgical strike designed to dismantle everything they'd built on lies and stolen money. Rebecca Chin coordinated the attack from her law office like a general planning a siege. "We're going after the company holdings first," she explained to Serafina during their Monday morning strategy session. Leander's investment firm, his board positions, the trust funds Viviette set up. Everything connected to the embezzled money gets frozen and investigated. Serafina sat across from her, Alara sleeping peacefully in a designer bassinet beside the conference table. "How long until they're completely bankrupt?" Rebecca smiled. "If we move aggressively, 3 months. Maybe less if the criminal charges stick." The news coverage was relentless and brutal. Every channel, every website, every newspaper ran the story with headlines that would haunt the Quintons forever. Society queen arrested at son's wedding. Billionaire heiress exposes years of charity theft. Labor room divorce. The cruelty that shocked a nation. Patricia's media strategy was working perfectly. Morning talk shows invited Serafina for interviews, but she declined them all. "Let them speculate," Patricia advised. "Mystery is more powerful than explanation." Let the story tell itself. And it did. Security footage from the wedding, recorded by a dozen guests, went viral. 20 million views in the first week. 50 million by week 2. The world watched Viviette being led away in handcuffs, watched Callista sobbing in her wedding dress, watched Serafina walk away with her baby, like a queen leaving a conquered battlefield. The comments sections were vicious toward the Quintons and worshipful toward Serafina. This is what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. She went from homeless shelter to billionaire and destroyed them all. Every woman who's ever been called not good enough felt that wedding speech in their soul. Serafina read the comments late at night while feeding Alara, and something in her chest loosened slightly. For years she believed Viviette's poison, that she was worthless, broken, undeserving. Seeing thousands of strangers defend her, celebrate her, recognize her worth, helped heal wounds she didn't know she could heal. But healing wasn't the priority yet. Destruction was. By week 3, the financial damage was catastrophic. Leander's investment firm lost 80% of its clients within days. No one wanted to be associated with a man who divorced his wife in a labor room and a family under criminal investigation. His board positions were revoked one by one. Luxury brands didn't want controversy, and Leander Quinton was now walking controversy. His personal bank accounts, tangled up with his mother's illegal money, got frozen pending the investigation. Within a month, he went from having access to hundreds of millions to having to borrow money for groceries. Marcus called with updates that felt like poetry. His Porsche got repossessed yesterday. The yacht's being seized. The vacation home in Aspen? Foreclosed. He's essentially homeless and broke. Serafina felt nothing hearing this. No satisfaction, no guilt, just the cold acknowledgement that consequences had arrived exactly on schedule. Callista left him on day 26. The annulment papers cited fraud. Leander had apparently failed to mention the ongoing investigations before the wedding. She gave a tearful interview to a tabloid, painting herself as an innocent victim who'd been deceived. "I thought I was marrying into a respectable family," she sobbed on camera, her youth and beauty working overtime to generate sympathy. "I had no idea about any of this. He lied to me about everything." Serafina watched the interview with Rebecca, both of them drinking wine in the penthouse living room while Alara slept. "Should we go after her too?" Rebecca asked. She was part of the humiliation. Serafina considered it, then shook her head. "She's irrelevant. A pawn who thought she was a queen. Let her disappear into whatever privileged obscurity she came from. Our target was always Viviette and Leander. Stay focused." Viviette's trial began in month 2. The prosecution had an airtight case, 15 years of bank records, fake invoices, shell companies, testimony from forensic accountants who'd traced every stolen dollar. Viviette's lawyers tried every tactic, claiming she was mentally unfit, blaming rogue employees, suggesting Serafina had fabricated evidence. None of it worked. The paper trail was too extensive, too detailed, too damning. Serafina attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row where Viviette couldn't avoid seeing her. She dressed impeccably, a different designer suit every day, hair perfect, makeup flawless. She wanted Viviette to see exactly what she'd become, wanted her to understand that the woman she'd called barren and broken and worthless now controlled her entire future. On day 4 of the trial, they made eye contact during a recess. Viviette looked 20 years older than she had at the wedding. Her hair had gone gray at the roots. Her face was gaunt. Her hands shook constantly. She leaned toward her lawyer and whispered something. The lawyer approached Rebecca. "Mrs. Quinton would like to speak with your client privately." Rebecca looked at Serafina with raised eyebrows. "It's probably an attempt to negotiate. Want to hear her out?" Serafina thought about it. Part of her wanted to refuse, to let Viviette rot without the satisfaction of a final conversation. But another part, the part that had spent 3 years enduring her cruelty, needed to hear what the woman had to say now that all her power was gone. They met in a private conference room, lawyers present but silent. Viviette sat across from Serafina, looking small and defeated, nothing like the towering terror she'd been in the mansion. You've destroyed everything, she said, without preamble. My reputation, my freedom, my family. Are you satisfied? Serafina studied her with clinical detachment. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Viviette's hands clenched on the table. I gave you a life you never could have achieved on your own. A home, status, everything a girl like you could dream of, a girl like me. Serafina interrupted. You mean an orphan? Someone without family money? Someone who had to work for everything instead of inheriting it. She leaned forward. You gave me nothing, Viviette. I earned every moment in that house by enduring your cruelty. And you know the best part? It was my house the entire time. Every insult you gave me about living on your charity, I was actually supporting you. How does that feel? Viviette's face twisted with rage and something else, fear. What do you want? Money? I don't have access to anything anymore, but after the trial, if there's anything left, I don't want your money. I have more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. Serafina's voice was ice. I want you to understand something. You called me barren after I lost 3 babies. You mocked my grief. You brought another woman into my home to replace me. You forced your son to divorce me while I was giving birth. And you threw me into a snowstorm with a newborn because you thought I was powerless. Every single choice you made created me. The woman sitting in front of you right now, you built her. So if you're looking for someone to blame for your destruction, look in a mirror. Viviette's composure cracked. Tears streamed down her face, her whole body shaking. I'm going to prison. They're saying 20 years minimum. I'll die there. Please, I'm begging you, drop the charges. Show mercy. Mercy. The word hung between them like a dead thing. Serafina remembered begging for mercy when Viviette called her food poison. Begging for kindness after each miscarriage. Begging for understanding when she was thrown out of the hospital. And Viviette had given her nothing but more cruelty. You want mercy? Serafina asked quietly. Where was your mercy when I needed it? Where was your compassion when I was grieving? Where was your humanity when I was at my lowest? She stood up, signaling the meeting was over. You're going to prison, Viviette. And every day you're there, I want you to remember that you did this to yourself. Not me. You. She walked out without looking back. Rebecca followed, closing the conference room door on Viviette's sobs. That was cold, Rebecca said, impressed. She deserved the cold, Serafina replied. She deserves worse than a cold. The trial concluded 2 weeks later. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Viviette to 18 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 12. As the bailiff led her away, Viviette turned back one last time. Her eyes found Serafina in the gallery, and in that moment there was something like recognition, the acknowledgement that she'd created her own destroyer. Then she was gone, led through a door to a life of orange jumpsuits and concrete cells. Leander tried to reach out once the trial ended. He called repeatedly, but Serafina never answered. He sent letters that she burned without reading. Finally, he showed up at her penthouse building, and the doorman called up for permission. There's a Mr. Quinton here to see you, ma'am. Should I send him away? Serafina looked at Alara, now 3 months old, making happy baby noises in her bouncer. Send him up. But security stays in the hallway. Leander looked terrible when he arrived, unshaven, clothes rumpled, eyes hollow. He'd lost weight and aged a decade in 3 months. Serafina, thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve. You don't, she agreed. Say what you came to say and leave. He stepped into the foyer, but she didn't invite him further. I'm sorry. I know that means nothing now, but I need you to hear it. I was weak. My mother controlled everything, and I let her because it was easier than fighting. I should have protected you. I should have defended you. I should have been the husband you deserved instead of the coward I was. He paused, gathering courage. Can I see Alara? Serafina considered refusing, then thought about the supervised visitation the court had granted. He'd see her eventually anyway. 5 minutes. From the doorway. Don't come closer. She brought Alara to where Leander could see her. His face crumpled watching his daughter, the child he'd abandoned, the life he'd thrown away. She's beautiful. She looks like you. She acts like me too, Serafina said. Strong. Resilient. A fighter. Everything you're not. Leander absorbed the blow, without defending himself. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve to ask. But I need you to know I loved you. I really did. I just loved my comfort more. The honesty was startling. Most people would have made excuses, blamed circumstances, minimized their choices. But Leander owned his cowardice completely, and somehow that made it worse. Love without action is just words, Serafina said. And words are cheap. Your mother is in prison. Your company is gone. Your money is gone. Your reputation is destroyed. And you're standing in the doorway of my penthouse begging for scraps of time with a daughter you abandoned. Are you happy with your choices now? He shook his head, tears falling. No. I'd give anything to go back and do things differently. But you can't. None of us can. We live with what we've done and who we became because of it. Your mother became a criminal. You became a coward. And I became untouchable. She stepped back, signaling the visit was over. Alara deserves a father in her life eventually. When she's old enough to understand what happened, I won't poison her against you. But I'll tell her the truth, that her father made choices that hurt people, including her, and he has to live with those choices forever. If you want a relationship with her, you'll have to earn it. Leander nodded, defeated. Thank you for that much. It's more than I deserve. Much more, Serafina agreed. She closed the door on him and returned to Alara, who was already trying to grab at colorful toys hanging from her bouncer. The baby had no idea her father had just been dismissed from her life, no concept of the war that had been fought for her. And that was exactly how it should be. Alara would grow up safe, loved, protected by a mother who'd learned that the only person you can truly count on is yourself, and sometimes that's enough. 6 months after the wedding that destroyed the Quinton family, Serafina made her final move. The mansion at 1847 Blackstone Avenue, the house where she'd been humiliated, starved of affection, and eventually discarded, stood empty now. Leander had moved his belongings out weeks ago, taking only what fit in a U-Haul truck. Everything else remained exactly as it had been the day Viviette got arrested. Serafina stood in the grand foyer for the first time since her return, Alara on her hip, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pain, no ghosts. Just expensive furniture in rooms that meant nothing anymore. What do you want to do with the property, ma'am? Gregory asked, his tablet ready to record her decision. The house alone is worth $40 million. You could sell it, lease it again, or burn it, Serafina said simply. Gregory's pen stopped mid-note. I'm sorry, legally speaking. Can I demolish this property and build something else? Gregory consulted his tablet. It's zoned residential, no historical protections. Yes, you could tear it down. But $40 million of real estate means nothing if keeping it means preserving their legacy. She walked through the room slowly, Alara babbling happily, unaware of the significance. The dining room where Viviette had called her cooking poison. The sitting room where she'd been mocked for 3 miscarriages. The bedroom where Leander had chosen silence over defending her. I want it gone. All of it. Demolished completely. Marcus joined the conversation via speakerphone from his office. Serafina, I understand the symbolism, but from a business perspective, I don't need a business perspective on this. I need closure. This house represents everything they tried to make me believe about myself, that I was worthless, that I didn't belong, that I should be grateful for crumbs. I'm not grateful. I'm not worthless. And I don't want a single brick standing as a reminder of who I used to be. There was silence on the line. Then Marcus's voice came back different, softer. Then burn it. Metaphorically speaking. I'll arrange for demolition crews. What do you want built in its place? Serafina had thought about this for weeks. A community center. Free childcare for single mothers, job training programs, counseling services. Everything I needed and couldn't find when I was at my lowest. Build it and endow it with enough money to run forever. Call it the Marcus Halvorsen Center, after my father. The demolition happened 3 weeks later. Serafina insisted on being there, standing across the street with Alara in a stroller, watching the wrecking balls reduce the mansion to rubble. Each wall that fell felt like shedding skin she'd outgrown. Patricia stood beside her, recording the whole thing for a documentary she was producing. This is powerful footage. The woman who was thrown out of this house is now the woman destroying it. Serafina smiled without taking her eyes off the demolition. I'm not destroying it. I'm transforming it. There's a difference. By sunset, nothing remained but foundation and broken concrete. The Quinton mansion, symbol of old money, cruelty, and unchecked privilege, was gone like it had never existed. Serafina took one last look at the empty lot, kissed Alara's forehead, and walked away. She never looked back. The next piece of her elegant exit involved distance. As much as she'd won, as completely as she'd dismantled the Quintons, Serafina realized she didn't want to build her new life in their shadow. This city held too many painful memories, too many people who knew her story, too many whispers everywhere she went. She needed a fresh start somewhere that didn't define her by what she'd survived. I'm moving, she told her team during a meeting. Where? Rebecca asked. Somewhere quieter, smaller, where Alara can grow up without being the girl from that scandal. I'm thinking of Charleston. Good schools, slower pace, far enough from here that we can breathe. Gregory nodded thoughtfully. We can transfer all your holdings, set up remote management. You don't need to be physically present to run your assets. When were you thinking? Next month. I want to be settled before Alara's first birthday. The month passed in a blur of packing, planning, and final business. Serafina held one last press conference, her only public statement since the wedding. She stood in front of cameras, wearing a navy suit, Alara in her arms, and addressed questions she'd refused to answer for months. A reporter asked the obvious question, Ms. Halvorson, you've destroyed one of the most powerful families in the city. Do you have any regrets? Serafina looked directly at the camera. My only regret is not discovering my own power sooner. I spent years believing what cruel people said about me. I let them define my worth. That was my mistake, but I fixed it. And my message to anyone watching who's ever been told they're not good enough: you're wrong about yourself. Your abusers are wrong about you. Your circumstances are temporary, but your strength is permanent. Find it, use it, and never let anyone make you small again. Another reporter jumped in. What about Leander Quinton? Will you allow him back into your daughter's life? That's not my decision to make alone. When Alara is old enough to understand what happened, she'll decide if she wants a relationship with her father. I won't poison her against him, but I won't lie to protect him either. Children deserve truth, even when it's ugly. And Viviette Quinton? Any message for her? Serafina's expression hardened slightly. She's in prison where she belongs. That's all the message required. The final question came from a younger female reporter. You've become a symbol for women who've been underestimated and discarded. We want your legacy to be. Serafina adjusted Alara. On her hip, thought carefully. I want women to know that being kind doesn't mean being weak. That surviving abuse doesn't make you broken. That you can endure hell and come out stronger instead of bitter. And most importantly, that the people who try to destroy you don't get to write your ending. You do. The press conference ended. The video went viral within hours, shared by millions of women who saw themselves in her story. Serafina's words became quotes on social media, printed on t-shirts, repeated in think pieces about power, resilience, and justice. She became more than just the woman who destroyed the Quintons. She became a movement. But Serafina wasn't interested in being a symbol. She was interested in being free. On the day she left the city, a convoy of moving trucks took her belongings to Charleston, while she and Alara flew first class. The little girl was 9 months old now, sitting up on her own, laughing at everything, completely unaware that her mother had just won a war. As the plane lifted off, Serafina looked out the window at the city shrinking below. Somewhere down there, Viviette sat in a prison cell. Leander lived in a modest apartment, working a regular job for the first time in his life. Callista had moved to Los Angeles to try her hand at influencer culture. And the Quinta name, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now synonymous with scandal and downfall. Charleston welcomed Serafina with southern charm and blessed anonymity. She bought a house near the water, not a mansion, just a comfortable home with a yard where Alara could play. No staff, no gates, no pretense. Just a mother and daughter building a life based on peace instead of performance. Her neighbors had no idea who she was. The woman next door, Susan, brought over a casserole the day she moved in. Welcome to the neighborhood. I hope you and your daughter love it here. Serafina accepted the casserole with genuine gratitude. Thank you. I think we will. Susan looked at the moving boxes, at Alara babbling in her playpen. Are you running from something or running toward something? The question was perceptive. Serafina smiled. Both, but mostly toward. Good answer, Susan said. If you need anything, babysitting, recommendations, or just a dull conversation, I'm 2 houses down. After she left, Serafina stood in her new living room surrounded by boxes and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safety. Not the kind that comes from money or lawyers or security teams. The kind that comes from knowing you've survived the worst and came out whole. Alara's first birthday party was small, just a few neighbors, some children from the local park, and a cake from the bakery down the street. No photographers, no press, no performance. Just a little girl smashing cake into her face, while adults laughed and took pictures on their phones. Serafina watched her daughter celebrate and thought about everything that had happened to bring them here. The orphan who learned to survive. The woman who saved a stranger and fell in love. The wife who endured years of cruelty. The mother who lost 3 babies before carrying one to term. The woman who was divorced in a labor room and thrown into a storm. The heiress who discovered her power. The force who destroyed her abusers. And finally, the mother who chose peace over revenge, privacy over fame, and love over everything else. That night, after the guests left and Alara was asleep, Serafina sat on her porch watching the sun set over Charleston Harbor. Gregory called to check in. How was the party? Perfect. Quiet. Normal. Normal. Gregory laughed. I don't think normal will ever describe you. Maybe not. But I can pretend for a while. She paused. How's the community center coming? Construction starts next month. We've already got a waiting list of families who need the services. It's going to help a lot of people, Serafina. Good. That's the point. After they hung up, Serafina poured herself a glass of wine and allowed herself a moment of reflection. She'd lost her parents at 10. She'd survived foster care. She'd built herself from nothing, been torn down by cruelty, rebuilt herself stronger, and claimed every inch of power she deserved. And now she was here, free, wealthy, safe, and watching her daughter grow up without the weight of anyone else's expectations. The old Serafina would have called this ending lucky. The new Serafina knew better. Luck had nothing to do with it. This was choice, strategy, survival, and refusing to let cruelty win. This was learning that the quietest people can carry the loudest roar. That underestimating someone doesn't make them weak. It makes them dangerous. That losing everything can teach you exactly how strong you need to be to take it all back. People asked if she was bitter. She wasn't. Bitterness required caring about the people who hurt you, and she'd moved beyond caring. The Quintons existed somewhere behind her, reduced to cautionary tales and ruined reputations. But they didn't occupy her thoughts anymore. They didn't deserve space in her head or her heart. They were finished, and she was free. Serafina raised her wine glass toward the sunset, a private toast to survival, strength, and starting over. To elegant exits, she whispered, and to never look back. Alara's cry came through the baby monitor, not distressed, just awake and wanting attention. Serafina set down her wine and went inside, climbing the stairs to her daughter's room. She picked up the little girl who'd given her a reason to fight, kissed her cheek, and held her close. You're going to grow up so different from how I did, she whispered. You'll never doubt you're loved. You'll never wonder if you matter. You'll know your worth from the beginning, because I'll make sure of it. And if anyone ever tries to make you feel small, I'll teach you exactly how to make yourself untouchable. Alara grabbed her mother's face with tiny hands and giggled. Serafina laughed, a real laugh, full of joy instead of strategy. This was the victory that mattered, not the demolished mansion or the imprisoned mother-in-law or the ruined reputation. This moment in a modest house in Charleston, holding her daughter and feeling genuinely happy. The Quintons took everything from her once, and she took it all back with interest. But more importantly, she built something new, something clean, something honest, something that would last long after the scandal faded from headlines. She built a life worth living, and that was the most elegant exit of all. 2 years passed in Charleston like a gentle exhale after holding your breath for decades. Alara turned 3, started preschool, and developed a personality that was equal parts stubborn determination and infectious joy, a perfect blend of survival instinct and the safety of being a child. Serafina watched her daughter grow and made a decision that would define the second chapter of her life. Money without purpose was just numbers on a screen. She had more than enough to live comfortably forever, but comfort wasn't the goal anymore. Impact was. She called Marcus on a Tuesday morning while Alara played in the backyard. I want to expand the community center model. I want to replicate it in 10 cities across the country. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's ambitious. We're talking about significant infrastructure, staff, and ongoing operational costs. Ballpark estimate? $200 million to start, another $50 million annually to maintain. Do it. Find the cities with the highest single-mother poverty rates and build there first. I want these centers operational within 18 months. The Marcus Halvorsen Centers became Serafina's obsession in the best possible way. She hired the best directors, social workers, childcare providers, and job training specialists money could buy. But she didn't just throw money at the problem. She stayed involved, visiting each location during construction, meeting with staff, and understanding the specific needs of each community. The center in Detroit focused on manufacturing job training. The one in rural Kentucky emphasized farming and sustainable agriculture. The Houston location specialized in healthcare certifications. Each center was tailored to its community, not some one-size-fits-all charity that looked good on paper, but failed in practice. Patricia documented the entire expansion for a book she was writing about Serafina's transformation from victim to philanthropist. You're building something that will outlast you by generations, Patricia said during an interview at the Charleston headquarters. What drives this? Is it guilt? Compensation for what happened to you? Serafina considered the question carefully. It's not guilt. It's a memory. I remember being 10 years old in a foster home, hungry because they fed their biological kids first. I remember being 18 with nowhere to go and no one to call. I remember being 28, pregnant and terrified, with no support system. If these centers had existed then, my life would have been different. I can't change my past, but I can change someone else's present. The centers opened one by one over 18 months. Each launch covered by local and national media. But Serafina refused to be the face of them. This isn't about me, she insisted when Patricia pushed for her to do interviews. The moment it becomes about my story, it stops being about the people we're helping. Let the centers speak for themselves. And they did. Within the first year, the 10 centers served over 15,000 women and children. Single mothers got job training that led to actual employment. Kids received free childcare in safe environments. Families accessed counseling, legal aid, and financial literacy programs. The results were measurable and undeniable. Poverty rates dropped in surrounding neighborhoods. Employment rose. Children's educational outcomes improved. Serafina read the quarterly reports like other people read novels, absorbing every statistic, every success story. Every life changed. But success brought attention she didn't want. Awards committees nominated her for humanitarian recognition. Universities offered honorary degrees. Magazines wanted her on their covers. She declined everything. Why? Gregory asked during one of their monthly financial reviews. You've earned recognition. You're doing genuine good in the world. Why hide from it? Because the moment I become a celebrity philanthropist, people stop seeing the work and start seeing me. I don't want to be inspiring. I don't want to be a role model. I just want to help people who need help and then go home to my daughter. Gregory smiled. You know that's exactly what makes you inspiring, right? The fact that you don't want credit. Serafina shrugged. Then let them be inspired quietly while I keep working. Alara started asking questions around age 4. Smart questions that made Serafina realize she couldn't hide forever. Mommy, why don't I have a daddy who lives with us? They were having breakfast, Alara's legs swinging from her chair, syrup on her face. Serafina had prepared for this conversation, but it still felt like stepping into cold water. You have a daddy. He just doesn't live here. He made some choices a long time ago that hurt people, and now he lives far away. Did he hurt you? The question was direct, innocent, devastating. Yes, sweetie. He did. Why? How do you explain betrayal to a 4-year-old? How do you teach your daughter about human weakness without making her afraid of the world? Sometimes people make bad choices because they're scared or weak. Your daddy loved his mother more than he loved being brave. And when he had to choose between protecting me or making his mother happy, he chose wrong. Alara thought about this while chewing her pancakes. Is he sorry? I think he is. But sorry doesn't fix everything. Some things stay broken even after you apologize. Do I have to see him? The fear in her daughter's voice broke something in Serafina's chest. Not if you don't want to. But someday, when you're older, you might want to meet him. And I'll never stop you from making that choice yourself. He's your father, and that relationship belongs to you, not me. Alara nodded, satisfied with this answer in the way children can be satisfied with partial truths. Okay, can I have more pancakes? Just like that, the conversation was over, but Serafina knew it was just the first of many. As Alara grew, the questions would get harder, more specific, more painful. She'd want to know details about the divorce, the betrayal, why her grandmother was in prison. And Serafina would tell her the truth, age-appropriate truth, but truth nonetheless. Because lies to protect children often became landmines that exploded when they got older. The 5th anniversary of the labor room divorce arrived on a cold February day. Serafina hadn't planned to acknowledge it, but Rebecca called with unexpected news. Leander's asking for expanded visitation. He's completed the court-ordered therapy, maintained steady employment, and his lawyer says he's ready to be a proper father to Alara. Serafina's first instinct was to say no, to protect her daughter from potential disappointment. But she'd promised herself she wouldn't let her pain dictate Alara's choices. What does the therapist recommend? Supervised visits initially, gradually increasing if they go well. The therapist noted that Alara is now old enough to form real memories, and that having an absent father can create abandonment issues even if you're doing everything right. Serafina rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of decisions that affected someone else's entire psychological development. Set up a meeting. I want to see him first, alone, before I let him near Alara. If he's serious about this, he can prove it to me first. They met at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between Charleston and where Leander now lived in Raleigh. He'd aged well considering everything. Or maybe he'd just aged honestly. Less polished, more real, wearing jeans and a simple shirt instead of designer everything. He stood when she arrived, awkward and uncertain. Serafina, thank you for agreeing to this. She sat without shaking his hand. I'm not here for you. I'm here because my daughter deserves the option of knowing her father, even if her father was a coward who abandoned her. Leander flinched, but didn't defend himself. You're right. I was a coward. I am a coward. I'm trying to be better. Trying isn't good enough when there's a child involved. Either you're committed to being her father or you stay away completely. She can't handle inconsistency. She can't handle promises you don't keep. She's 4 years old and she deserves better than half-hearted fatherhood. I know. He looked at his coffee cup like it held answers. I've been in therapy for 3 years. Working through everything. My mother's control, my weakness, my failures. The therapist helped me understand that I spent my whole life being what other people expected instead of developing my own spine. I'm not making excuses. I'm explaining what I'm trying to fix. Serafina studied him, looking for sincerity or manipulation. All she saw was tired honesty. What do you want from this, Leander? Really, I want to know my daughter. I want her to have a father who shows up, who keeps promises, who teaches her that not all men are like I was. I want to earn back what I threw away, even though I know I might never deserve it. He finally met her eyes. And I want to apologize properly. Not the weak apology I gave you years ago. A real one. I don't need your apology, Serafina said. I stopped needing anything from you the day I discovered my inheritance and realized I was always stronger than you gave me credit for. I know, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry, Serafina. I'm sorry I didn't defend you for my mother. I'm sorry I let her torture you for years. I'm sorry I handed you divorce papers in a hospital bed. I'm sorry I threw you into a storm with our newborn baby. I'm sorry I chose comfort over courage and my mother over my family. And I'm sorry I wasted 3 years with an incredible woman because I was too weak to see what I had until it was gone. The apology landed differently than his previous attempts. Maybe because time had passed. Maybe because she'd healed enough that his words couldn't hurt her anymore. Maybe because she heard genuine remorse instead of self-pity. Okay, she said finally. Here's how this works. You'll have supervised visits with Alara once a month for 6 months. If those go well, if you show up on time every time, if you follow through on every promise, if my daughter comes home happy instead of confused, we'll gradually increase it. But the first time you disappoint her, the first time you cancel, the first time you choose something else over showing up, you're done. I won't give you a second chance to break her heart. Leander nodded, and something like hope flickered across his face. I won't let you down. I won't let her down. We'll see, Serafina said, standing. The first visit is scheduled for next Saturday. 1 hour, supervised by a social worker. Don't bring gifts trying to buy her affection. Just show up and be honest. That's all I'm asking. The visits began cautiously. Alara was shy at first, clinging to Serafina's leg when Leander arrived for that first supervised hour. But he was patient, gentle, letting her warm up on her own timeline. He didn't push, didn't force connection, just sat on the floor and played with whatever toys she brought him. By the third visit, Alara was laughing. By the sixth, she was asking when Daddy was coming again. Serafina watched this relationship develop with complicated emotions. Relief that Alara was getting a father, fear that he'd eventually disappoint her, and something uncomfortably close to forgiveness. Not forgiveness for what he'd done, but acceptance that people could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves if they worked hard enough. After a year of consistent visits, Leander asked for overnight stays. Serafina agreed with conditions. He had to childproof his apartment, take a parenting class, and provide references from his therapist. He did all of it without complaint. The first time Alara spent the weekend with her father, Serafina paced her house like a caged animal, checking her phone every 30 minutes for updates. But Alara came home happy, chattering about pancakes for breakfast and a park with swings, and how Daddy read her 3 bedtime stories. Did you have fun? Serafina asked carefully. So much fun. Can I go again? Alara's excitement was genuine, uncomplicated by the history her mother carried. And watching her daughter's joy, Serafina realized something profound. Healing wasn't just about her anymore. It was about giving Alara the childhood she'd never had. The one with 2 parents who, despite their failures with each other, both loved her unconditionally. The Marcus Halvorsen centers continued expanding, 15 locations, then 20, then 30. Each one employed local staff, served local families, and became integrated into their communities as permanent resources. Serafina's wealth, built on her father's foresight and her own careful management, funded operations that would continue long after she was gone. She'd set up trusts, established boards, created infrastructure that didn't depend on her personal involvement. The work would outlive her, and that was exactly the point. One afternoon, Sitting in her Charleston office, reviewing applications for the next center location, Gregory called with unusual news. "There's someone here to see you." She didn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. Her name is Susan Brennan. Seraphina's pen stopped. Susan Brennan. The name was familiar, but she couldn't place it immediately. Does she say what it's regarding? She says she's Callista's mother. The past, which Seraphina thought she'd left behind completely, suddenly walked back into her present. Susan Brennan sat in Seraphina's Charleston office, looking nothing like her daughter. Where Callista had been all polished beauty and entitled confidence, her mother carried herself with worn dignity, the kind that comes from hard years honestly lived. She was maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back simply and clothes that were clean, but clearly not expensive. Seraphina studied her carefully, looking for the trap, the angle, the reason Callista's mother would show up unannounced 5 years after the wedding disaster. "Mrs. Brennan, I'll admit I'm surprised to see you. What can I do for you?" Susan clutched her purse in her lap, nervous but determined. "I came to apologize. Not for my daughter. She's an adult and her mistakes are her own. But for my part in what happened to you." Seraphina leaned back in her chair, genuinely curious. "Your part? I don't recall you being involved at all." "That's exactly it," Susan said, her voice thick with regret. "I wasn't involved because I didn't know. Callista told me she was dating a divorced man, that it was all very civilized, that everyone had moved on. She made it sound like a normal situation. I didn't find out the truth until after the wedding, until I saw the videos, read the news stories, learned what really happened to you in that hospital." Her hands twisted the purse strap. "When I confronted her, she said you were exaggerating, that you'd trapped Leander and got what you deserved. But I knew. A mother knows when her child is lying. So I did what I should have done from the beginning. I investigated." She pulled a folder from her purse, hands shaking slightly. "I found witnesses from the hospital that night. Nurses who saw them serve you divorce papers right after you gave birth. Security footage of them throwing you out in a snowstorm. I collected everything, and I went to Callista with proof that she'd been part of something monstrous." "What did she say?" Seraphina asked, genuinely interested now. "She said you were weak, and that weak people deserve what happens to them. She said Viviette was right to get rid of you, because you didn't belong in their world." Susan's voice broke. "That's when I realized I'd failed as a mother. I'd raised a daughter so concerned with status and money that she'd lost all sense of basic human decency. I threw her out of my house that day. Haven't spoken to her since." The confession hung between them, heavy and unexpected. Seraphina hadn't anticipated this. Genuine remorse from someone adjacent to her pain. "Mrs. Brennan, I appreciate you coming here, but I'm not sure what you want from me. Your daughter made her choices. You're not responsible for them. I know, but I wanted you to hear from someone connected to that nightmare that what happened to you was wrong. Unforgivably wrong. And I wanted to tell you that I'm in awe of what you've done since. The community centers, the work you're doing, it's extraordinary." Seraphina softened slightly. "Thank you. That means something, actually." Susan stood, preparing to leave, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something? How did you do it? How did you survive something that cruel and come out stronger instead of bitter?" The question deserved honesty. Seraphina thought carefully before answering. "I didn't have a choice about what happened to me. None of us do. But I had a choice about what I did after. I could let it destroy me, or I could let it forge me into something stronger. I chose strength because I had a daughter who deserved a mother who knew her own worth." She paused. "And because staying broken would mean they won. I refused to let them win." Susan nodded, tears in her eyes. "Your daughter is lucky to have you." After she left, Seraphina sat in her office, thinking about the unexpected paths of healing. She'd never thought about Callista's mother, never considered the collateral damage her revenge might have caused in families adjacent to the Quintons. The reminder was humbling. Pain rippled out in ways you couldn't always control or predict. That evening, Seraphina picked up Alara from school. Her daughter ran out of the building with a painting clutched in her hands, face bright with excitement. "Mommy, look what I made. It's our family. The painting showed three stick figures, a tall woman, a small girl, and a man standing slightly apart but still in the frame. Alara pointed proudly. "That's you, that's me, and that's Daddy." Miss Jennifer said families come in all different shapes. Serafina's throat tightened. 5 years ago, she couldn't have imagined this. Her daughter painting a family that included the man who'd abandoned them both, and doing it with pure joy instead of confusion or pain. "It's beautiful, baby. We'll hang it on the fridge when we get home." They drove home through Charleston's evening traffic, Alara chattering about school, while Serafina half listened, her mind on bigger questions. What was the legacy? Was it the empire she'd built, the centers that would help thousands? Was it the revenge she'd extracted, the justice she'd secured? Or was it simpler than that? Was it just this child beside her, growing up safe and loved and confident? That night, after Alara was asleep, Serafina sat at her desk and wrote something she'd been avoiding for years. A letter to her younger self, the 10-year-old orphan, the foster kid who never belonged, the woman who'd been called worthless. She didn't plan to send it anywhere and didn't need anyone to read it. But she needed to write it, needed to close the loop between who she'd been and who she'd become. "Dear Serafina," she wrote, "you're 10 years old and your parents just died and you think your life is over. You're wrong. It's just beginning in ways you can't imagine. The next 18 years are going to be hard. You'll sleep in 14 different beds in 12 different homes. You'll go hungry sometimes. You'll be bullied, forgotten, overlooked. You'll learn to make yourself invisible, because visibility brings pain. But here's what you don't know yet. You're learning survival skills that will make you unstoppable. At 28, you'll save a man's life and fall in love. You'll marry into a family that treats you like garbage. You'll endure cruelty you don't deserve. You'll lose 3 babies and be called barren. You'll be divorced in a hospital room after giving birth and thrown into a snowstorm with your newborn. And you'll think that's rock bottom. You'll think you've lost everything. But rock bottom is actually the foundation you'll build your empire on. You'll discover you're a billionaire. You'll take back everything that was stolen from you. You'll send your abuser to prison. You'll destroy the people who tried to destroy you. And then, this is the important part, you'll move on. You'll build something better than revenge. You'll create centers that help women like you, women who need support and second chances. You'll raise a daughter who knows her worth from the beginning. You'll learn to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. I wish I could tell you it doesn't hurt. It does. Some nights, you'll still wake up crying from nightmares about that hospital room. Some days you'll see a mother with 3 children and grieve for the babies you lost. Some moments you'll wonder if you're enough, if you've done enough, if you matter. But here's the truth the 10-year-old needs to hear. You matter. You always mattered. Your worth was never determined by the people who couldn't see it. And the life you're going to build, the empire of compassion, the daughter who paints you into her family pictures, the centers that will help thousands, it's all worth the pain you'll endure to get here. So hold on, survive, and know that the woman you become is someone the 10-year-old you would be proud of. Love yourself at 35. She folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and sealed it. Then she did something unexpected. She drove to the Marcus Halvorson Center in Charleston and asked the director for permission to put it in the library they'd built there. "I want women who are at their lowest to find this someday. I want them to know that survival is possible, that strength is real, that rock bottom can become a foundation." The director placed it in a frame on the library wall with a small plaque, "A letter to my younger self by Anonymous." Within weeks, women were photographing it, sharing it online, crying over it. Serafina never told anyone she'd written it. Some gifts were better given anonymously. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Serafina received notice that Viviette had died in prison. Heart attack, sudden and final. She was 68 years old and had served 6 years of her 18-year sentence. The notification came from the prison with a question. Would the family like to claim the body and arrange burial? Serafina stared at the letter for a long time. Technically, as Leander's ex-wife and Alara's mother, she was still legally connected to the Quinton family. She could refuse, let the state handle it, let Viviette be buried in a pauper's grave with no marker. Part of her wanted exactly that, one final humiliation for the woman who'd caused so much pain. But another part, the part that had spent 5 years building instead of destroying, knew that revenge had an endpoint. That carrying hate forever was just another kind of prison. She called Leander. Your mother died. Silence on the other end. Then a shaky breath. When? Yesterday. Heart attack. The prison is asking who wants to handle burial. I'm calling because Alara should never learn that I prevented her grandmother from being buried with dignity, even if that grandmother was a monster. Leander was quiet. For so long she thought he'd hung up. Finally, thank you. For calling me. For being the bigger person even when my mother never was. They made arrangements together. Not elaborate, not expensive, just a simple burial with a plain headstone. No service, no announcements, no performance. Just closure. The day of the burial, only 3 people attended. Leander, Serafina, and Gregory, who came because someone should witness the end of the Quinton era. They stood at the graveside in silence. Leander cried quietly. Serafina felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, just the neutral acknowledgement that a chapter was finally completely closed. She loved you, Serafina said to Leander eventually. She loved you in a twisted, controlling, toxic way. But it was love. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it. She destroyed everything she touched, Leander said. Including me. She destroyed who you were. You had to build who you became. We all did. After the burial, Leander asked if they could talk. They sat on a bench near the cemetery entrance, autumn leaves falling around them like the past letting go. Alara asked me last week if I was proud of her, he said. And I realized she was really asking if I loved her unconditionally, if I'd stay even when things got hard. I told her I was learning how to be proud of myself first, so I could teach her to always be proud of herself always. Serafina saw the growth in him. Slow, painful, but real. That's good, Leander. That's what she needs. I know I'll never make up for what I did to you. I know sorry will never be enough. But I want you to know that becoming a proper father to Alara, showing up, keeping promises, being consistent, it's the first thing in my life I'm actually proud of. And I couldn't do it without you letting me try. I didn't let you for me, Serafina said honestly. I left you for her. She deserves a father who shows up. You just happened to become one. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, 2 people who'd once promised forever and now could barely manage cordiality. But it was enough. More than enough. Because they'd created Alara, and Alara was thriving, and that mattered more than their history. Before they parted ways, Leander asked one more question. Are you happy? Really happy. Serafina thought about her life now. The centers that helped thousands, the daughter who painted families with joy, the peace she'd found in Charleston, the freedom from needing anyone's validation. Yes, she said simply. I really am. Good, Leander said. That's all I wanted to know. That you got the happy ending they tried to steal from you. 7 years after the labor room betrayal, Serafina stood on the stage of the 30th Marcus Halvorsen Center opening in Portland. Alara, now 9 years old, sat in the front row next to her father. The crowd was mostly women, single mothers, women fleeing abuse, women rebuilding from rock bottom. Serafina looked at them and saw herself in every face. I'm not going to tell you my story, she began, because you've probably already heard it or read it somewhere. Instead, I'm going to tell you yours. You're standing at the beginning of something new. Maybe you just left someone who hurt you. Maybe you just lost everything. Maybe you're convinced you're not strong enough to survive this. You're wrong. You're stronger than you know. You're more capable than anyone has given you credit for. And these centers, are here to prove it to you. When I was at my lowest, I had no family, no money, no support. I had to build everything from nothing. Most of you won't have to start from nothing, because we're giving you the tools I wish I'd had. Job training so you can support yourself. Childcare so your kids are safe while you work. Counseling so you can heal from whatever trauma brought you here. legal aid so you can fight back against people who think they're untouchable. We're giving you the foundation I had to create alone. What you build on that foundation is up to you." She paused, making eye contact with women in the crowd. "You might not believe me today. You might think this is just another charity that will disappoint you. But come back tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. We'll still be here. We'll always be here. Because I know what it's like to be thrown away. And I'm spending the rest of my life making sure no woman has to feel that way again." The applause was thunderous. Women cried, hugged each other, pulled out their phones to record. After the ceremony, a young woman approached Serafina, maybe 22, holding a toddler, eyes red from crying. "I'm Sarah. I left my husband 3 weeks ago. He was bad. Really bad. I've been living in my car because I have no money and my family won't help. I saw the flyer for this center and thought it was too good to be true. Is it? Is this really free? Is there really help?" Serafina knelt down to the toddler's level, smiled at the little girl who reminded her of Alara at that age. Then she stood and looked Sarah in the eyes. "It's real. Come inside. We'll get you housing assistance today, childcare enrollment tomorrow, and job training by the end of the week. You're not living in your car anymore. That part of your story is over." Sarah broke down sobbing. Serafina held her while she cried. This stranger who carried the same wounds she'd once carried. And in that moment, holding a woman who needed someone to believe in her, Serafina understood what legacy actually meant. It wasn't the money or the buildings or even the revenge she'd extracted. Legacy was this: being the person you needed when you were at your worst. Being the help you wished had existed. Being the proof that survival is possible and strength is real. That night, Serafina returned home to Charleston, exhausted but content. Alara was already asleep after her long day at the opening. Serafina checked on her daughter, kissed her forehead gently, whispered the same words she'd whispered every night since that hospital room. "I fought for you. I'll always fight for you. And you'll grow up knowing you're worth fighting for." She walked to her home office and looked at the wall where she'd hung photographs from every center opening, every life changed, every woman who'd come through the doors seeking help and left with hope. 30 centers now. Soon to be 40. Eventually 100. Her father's money, invested in futures instead of frivolous things. His legacy merged with hers, creating something that would outlast them both. On her desk sat the letter from the prison, the one that had informed her of Viviette's death. She picked it up, read it one last time, then did something she'd been planning for months. She burned it in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. The woman who tried to destroy her was dead and buried. The man who'd betrayed her had become a decent father. The family that called her worthless had been proven catastrophically wrong. And she, the orphan, the foster kid, the woman thrown away, had built an empire of compassion that would help thousands of women long after everyone forgot the scandal that started it all. Serafina poured herself a glass of wine, walked out to her porch, and looked up at the Charleston stars. Somewhere out there, other women were surviving their own nightmares, fighting their own battles, discovering their own strength. And tomorrow, the Marcus Halvorsen Centers would open their doors again, ready to help whoever walked through them. "This is how we win," Serafina whispered to the night sky. "Not by destroying our enemies, though sometimes that's necessary. We win by building something better than what tried to break us. We win by helping others survive what we survived. We win by refusing to let cruelty have the last word." She raised her glass toward the stars, toward her father, who'd left her everything, toward her younger self, who'd survived the impossible, toward every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. To legacy, to survive, to know your worth even when no one else can see it, and to build empires out of the ashes of other people's cruelty. The wine was excellent, the night was peaceful, and inside her home, her daughter slept safely, unaware that she was the greatest victory of all, the living proof that love could survive even the cruelest betrayal. Serafina finished her wine and went inside, closing the door on the last one final time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new women to help, new lives to change. But tonight, she rested in the knowledge that she'd done exactly what she set out to do 5 years ago in that hospital room when the world tried to destroy her. She survived. She thrived. She won. And the victory was so much sweeter than revenge could ever be. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment and tell us the part of the story you enjoyed most.